If you're seeing this, something in you has already begun to awaken. You may think it was chance that brought you here, a random flicker of curiosity in the endless scroll of your day. But there are no accidents in the field. What if I told you that this exact moment, the one where you inhale right now, might be the turning point between timelines? That one breath held consciously could collapse the reality. You've been stuck repeating and open a doorway into an entirely new one. It sounds impossible, but the laws governing consciousness don't work by human logic. They work by observation. And the way you observe yourself, especially in this next breath, determines whether you remain in the loop or step beyond it. Imagine this every day. You perform thousands of small unconscious actions. You blink, you scroll, you breathe. Each of these gestures tells the universe who you believe you are. But the breath, more than any thought, word, or intention, is the signal that encodes your state into the quantum field. It's the language the universe actually understands. When your breath is hurried, your world feels hurried. When your breath is fragmented, your life reflects fragmentation. And when you hold one breath, just one, with full awareness, you interrupt the entire code that keeps your personal reality repeating. That single act of stillness is the fracture line through which light enters the loop. The physicists call this the Quantum Zeno effect, the strange discovery that observation itself can freeze a particle's motion, holding it in one state, rather than allowing it to decay. It's as if attention arrests time. But beyond the lab, this principle applies to consciousness. The more you observe a state, fear, doubt, fatigue, the more it lingers. The more you observe peace, coherence, trust, the more stable those frequencies become in your life. Reality at its root mirrors your attention. This is not mystical poetry. It's a mirror of how energy behaves under awareness. So if you've been feeling trapped, looping through the same conversations, emotions, or outcomes, it's not because you're broken. It's because your awareness has been observing the same internal movie, frame after frame, breath after breath. The miracle happens the moment you stop trying to fix the movie and instead shift your gaze toward the observer watching it. That's when time hesitates. That's when new probability waves begin to appear, silent, shimmering possibilities that have been waiting just beyond your habitual breath. Hold one breath today, not to control it, but to notice it. As you do, something subtle will happen. The edges of your awareness will soften, the noise will dim, and within that quiet you might sense the outline of another, you, one who remembers. This is not about spirituality as performance, nor science as theory. This is about remembering that your very act of noticing carries power. If you're hearing these words, it's because the field is offering you a choice. Remain in motion or pause long enough to see the machinery of your own creation. In this episode, we'll explore why so many people remain stuck in a repeating timeline of thought and feeling, and how the simple act of holding one conscious breath can break the cycle. We'll enter the mechanics of the Quantum Zeno effect not as formula, but as lived experience. You'll see why your awareness, when stabilized through breath, becomes the still point around which the entire universe reorganizes. And by the end of this journey, you'll understand that the phrase "your last chance" doesn't mean doom, it means awakening. Because every ending in the quantum field is only the beginning of awareness choosing itself again. Most people never notice the loop they're in because it feels like life. You wake up, check messages, think the same thoughts about yesterday, worry about the same things about tomorrow. You might change environments, partners, even goals, but the rhythm underneath remains identical. The loop is invisible because it's rhythmic, synchronized to your breath, to your nervous system, to the way you interpret the smallest events. A text message, delay becomes rejection. A deadline becomes threat. A pause in conversation becomes proof you're not enough. In each of these moments, something inside you tightens and your breath shortens. You call it stress, but what's really happening is that consciousness collapses inward. The field you are, spacious, limitless, contracts into a narrow tunnel of identification. And that tunnel, that contraction, is what we call ordinary reality. Every loop begins with a trigger. The trigger ignites a physiological state, perhaps a spike of adrenaline or a flush of heat across your chest. The state becomes a meaning: I'm under threat. That meaning dictates action: retreat, attack, numb, distract. And that action produces new evidence confirming your original assumption. See, I was right to fear. Then the cycle resets. Trigger state, meaning action, evidence. Each breath that follows carries the same frequency, reinforcing the same storyline. It's a perfect feedback system, precise and unconscious. You think you're reacting to life, but you're reacting to memory. You think you're choosing, but your past is breathing you. In physics, this resembles a resonance loop, an oscillation maintained by its own feedback. In consciousness, it appears as personality. You've mistaken the stability of the pattern for the stability of identity. But identity as you know it is just a habit of attention. You've practiced being you through repetitive observation so many times that the universe, obeying the Quantum Zeno effect, keeps that version from decaying. It's not that you're imprisoned by fate, it's that you've been observing the same self into existence. This is why transformation feels so elusive. You can read, meditate, visualize, but if your breath and attention still orbit the same emotional tone, the loop holds. You may experience temporary shifts, glimpses of expansion, but the moment attention drifts back to old sensations, the particle refreezes. The loop restabilizes. It's not punishment, it's precision. The field merely mirrors the frequency of observation, and your primary observation tool is your body's rhythm. Every inhale and exhale is a signal. Continue this pattern. Consider how subtly this works. You receive unexpected news, your shoulders tense. The breath becomes shallow, high in the chest. That state floods your nervous system with signals of danger. The mind searches for context. Why am I anxious? And assigns meaning to match the physiology. Suddenly you remember unpaid bills or unresolved arguments. The story aligns with the state. The state justifies the story. You exhale with frustration, reinforcing the pattern. By the end of the day, you believe you've had a stressful day, when in truth you've had one stress multiplied by 1,000 identical breaths. The quantum field doesn't read your diary. It reads your coherence. When you remain in a low coherent state, fragmented attention, erratic breath, inconsistent heart rhythm, you're effectively broadcasting static. The field returns static. Circumstances become chaotic, not because the world is cruel, but because the broadcast lacks signal. And so you keep trying to rearrange the outer chaos, not realizing you're the transmitter. This is the perceptual crisis of the modern human, confusing feedback for fate. We say life keeps testing me, but what life is really doing is offering an infinite mirror. The same scenes reappear slightly altered until observation itself changes. The mechanism is merciful. It allows consciousness to meet itself over and over until awareness stabilizes. The suffering isn't punishment, it's rehearsal. The field is patient, repeating lessons until coherence becomes your natural state. If you want proof, notice your breath right now. Was it automatic until this sentence reminded you? That's how the loop hides within the unnoticed. Each unconscious inhale is a vote for continuation. Each conscious breath is a disruption. The power to alter timelines doesn't come from dramatic action, but from interrupting micro-patterns of inattention. The mind believes change requires force, yet the field responds only to frequency. When you shift your breath, you shift your frequency. When frequency shifts, probability collapses differently. And in that new collapse, a new life begins forming. This is why some people live decades repeating the same year. They never stop observing the old movie. They breathe the same way through every plot twist. The loop feels safe because it's known, but safety isn't the same as peace. Peace is alive. Loops are frozen. The Quantum Zeno effect shows that continuous measurement stabilizes a particle. Continuous self-measurement stabilizes identity. That's why every attempt at transformation feels like it snaps back. The self is being constantly reobserved. Breaking the loop doesn't mean rejecting the self. It means pausing observation long enough for something new to emerge. This is where the breath becomes revolutionary. A single held inhale suspends the feedback momentarily. In that suspension, awareness glimpses itself beyond form. It's like light peeking through the film of habitual perception. This is the moment when the quantum field can reorganize, when what's been frozen begins to flow. If you've ever felt déjà vu, as though life keeps offering the same test with different faces, it's the field showing you your coherence pattern. It's saying, notice what you're noticing. Because only through noticing can you step off the conveyor belt of repetition. This is the first doorway. Next, we'll explore the emotional language of the field itself, how observation turns into creation through feeling, how probability waves become lived experience, and how your breath, when coherent, doesn't just sustain you, it teaches the universe who you are becoming. When you hear the term quantum, you might imagine laboratories, equations, and the strange dance of invisible particles. But beneath the formulas lies something profoundly intimate. The quantum world isn't a distant abstraction, it's a mirror for your inner experience. Every electron, every photon responds to observation. When scientists first noticed that a particle behaves differently when it's being watched, they stumbled onto a truth mystics have whispered for millennia: consciousness shapes reality. But in your everyday life, this principle reveals itself not through equipment, but through emotion. Think of each emotion as a frequency, an energetic pattern radiating through your entire field. When you feel joy, the signal is coherent, rhythmic, luminous. When you feel fear, the signal becomes erratic, fragmented, scattered. Neither is wrong. Both are data. But coherence allows the quantum field to organize around you, while incoherence scrambles that organization. In other words, emotion is how consciousness measures itself. And just like the quantum Zeno effect stabilizes a particle through observation, emotional repetition stabilizes your timeline through feeling. You become a reality artist painting with waves of attention. Let's make this tangible. Imagine the moment you fall in love. Time dilates. The colors around you seem richer, the air itself charged. It's not a trick of hormones, it's a temporary coherence event. Your awareness becomes fully present, synchronized with the pulse of existence. You observe your partner, but more than that, you observe yourself as love. For a while, probability collapses into harmony. Then life resumes, thoughts intrude, fear of loss arises, and coherence fades. The lesson isn't to cling to the person, it's to recognize the state. The quantum field didn't respond to the object of your affection. It responded to the frequency you became. Now imagine anger. The body tightens, breath shortens, perception narrows. You're observing a threat, stabilizing that version of reality. Every repetition strengthens the probability of encountering more threats. The field simply mirrors your signal with impeccable honesty. It's not punishing you, it's learning from you. This is the emotional counterpart of quantum measurement. The universe takes its cues from what you feel most consistently. You are the observer, and your emotional tone is the instruction. This is why awareness must extend beyond thought into sensation. Thoughts flicker too quickly to stabilize a field, but emotion lingers. It's the slow vibration that encodes patterns. When you maintain resentment for months, the field holds it as your chosen frequency. When you cultivate gratitude for seconds, the field amplifies that coherence until circumstances reflect it. The field itself is neutral, but it has memory, not the kind stored in time, but resonance memory. It remembers what you repeatedly feel. That memory organizes your reality. So what does this mean for you now, sitting wherever you are, hearing these words? It means that everything unfolding in your life right now is a perfect mirror of your sustained frequencies. Not your passing thoughts or occasional hopes, but the emotional atmosphere you most often inhabit. This can feel sobering at first, but it's profoundly liberating. Because if reality is emotional feedback, then you are never powerless. You're simply receiving your own vibration at scale. Change the vibration and the movie re-edits itself. This is where breath enters as the bridge. Breathing consciously shifts the electrical pattern of your heart, which then harmonizes the brain's signals, creating coherence between body and field. Science can measure this as heart rate variability, but in lived experience it feels like calm lucidity. You become the still observer within motion. The moment your breath slows and lengthens, the field receives new data. Stability is now the baseline. Probabilities rearrange accordingly. It's crucial to understand that coherence doesn't mean forced positivity. It's not pretending pain doesn't exist or bypassing what's real. It means staying present with the emotion without letting it define you. Observation, not suppression. When you feel sadness, fully breathing it, witnessing it without story, you collapse the waveform of avoidance. The energy integrates, completing its loop. That's how emotional alchemy works. Every feeling, when witnessed, consciously returns to stillness. Stillness is the field's native language. In that stillness, perception widens. You begin to sense subtle correlations, how certain moods attract certain events, how specific tones of thought magnetize particular people. It's like learning to read the field's handwriting. You realize manifestation isn't about commanding reality, but conversing with it. The breath becomes your syntax emotion, your vocabulary awareness, your grammar. Together they form the language through which the universe understands your intent. And the most coherent statement you can make to the universe is silence, awareness free from commentary. That silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It's the pregnant quiet before creation, the pause where infinite possibilities await observation. You felt a trace of it earlier when we spoke of holding one breath. That momentary stillness wasn't emptiness, it was fullness beyond measure. This is the heart of the observer effect, as lived truth. The world you see isn't solid until you look at it through a specific emotional lens. Shift the lens and the scenery rearranges. Every person you meet, every challenge you face is not a fixed object, but a probability wave collapsing according to your current state. Even time itself bends to coherence. When you're anxious, time races. When you're absorbed in love or creativity, time dissolves. You aren't inside. Time is inside your perception. The emotional quantum field is compassionate. It doesn't judge your loops. It invites you to recognize them. Each repeated pattern is consciousness asking, are you ready to observe differently? The moment you answer yes, the field reorganizes often instantly. A phone call, a coincidence, a sudden insight. All signs that the probability grid has been updated by your new frequency. In truth, there are no small shifts. Every coherent breath is a declaration to existence. I remember. I am the observer. You don't have to perfect this. The field doesn't need perfection. It responds to sincerity. Even brief moments of awareness, seconds of genuine stillness ripple outward, reorganizing countless unseen probabilities. So if you've ever wondered why change feels unstable, it's because your observation wavers. You glimpse coherence, then return to analysis, freezing the wave again. But once you understand that your breath, emotion, and attention are the instruments of creation, stability becomes natural. You realize that the same principle that governs subatomic particles governs your heart. Observation sustains being. Awareness stabilizes matter. And the universe waits patiently for you to look at yourself through the eyes of coherence. Next, we'll travel back to the ancients, those who mapped this territory long before physics had language for it. They taught that breath was not air, but spirit, that to breathe consciously was to walk between worlds. From Egypt to the Himalayas to the mystics of Jerusalem, they all pointed to the same truth. The observer's breath is the bridge between heaven and earth. Long before the word quantum existed, ancient civilizations were already conversing with the same mystery. They didn't need microscopes to understand the field, they lived inside its rhythms. Along the banks of the Nile, Egyptian initiates gathered in chambers built from limestone and silence. They believed breath wasn't merely survival, it was the living echo of divine order, what they called Ma'at, the principle of balance that sustains the cosmos. To breathe consciously was to honor that balance, to align the inner universe with the outer one. When their priests exhaled, they imagined they were releasing chaos back into the void. When they inhaled, they were drawing harmony into form. This was not ritual for the gods, it was communication with the fabric of existence itself. The scrolls describe initiates lying on cool stone floors, hands on their chests, entering a state they called the stillness of Ra, the pause between the sun's rising and setting where creation holds its breath. They believed that in that sacred interval, a person could witness the divine spark, hovering between life and death, movement and rest. That was their quantum gap. In that pause, they said the heart's light Ka and the soul's breath Ba merged. When joined, they created the immortal self, the one not bound by time. To them, immortality wasn't endless physical existence. It was endless awareness of awareness. Meanwhile, in the East, Buddhist adepts discovered the same principle through anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. The Buddha taught that one who truly observes the breath enters the realm beyond becoming. Just as the sky is untouched by the passing clouds, he said so the mind is untouched by the passing thoughts. Their focus wasn't control, but observation, a delicate noticing of inhalation, exhalation, and the gap in between. Through this simple act, they experience cessation, the still point where craving dissolves and consciousness expands. To them, that stillness wasn't empty, it was radiant clarity, the same light the Egyptians called Ra. Different language, same frequency. And in the Hebrew mystic tradition, the Kabbalists spoke of Ruach, the divine breath animating all things. They taught that when a person becomes aware of Ruach, they touch Neshama, the higher soul that breathes through them. Breath wasn't personal, it was the circulation of God through matter. Each inhale drew the universe inward. Each exhale released creation outward. By the breath of his mouth, the ancient texts say, the heavens were made. To breathe consciously was to participate in that act of creation, to echo the divine rhythm that sustains existence. All these traditions pointed to a single bridge, the awareness of breath as the threshold between worlds. The Egyptians called it the gate of Ra. The Buddhists called it the doorway to nirvana. The Kabbalists called it the ladder of Jacob, ascending and descending energies uniting heaven and earth. What science now calls the quantum field, they called spirit. What we name the observer effect, they named prayer. And the sacred act was the same to hold awareness steady long enough for heaven to see itself through human eyes. The metaphors converge around one truth: stillness is creative. In Egypt, stillness preserved ma'at. In Buddhism, it revealed emptiness. In Kabbalah, it restored unity. Each path taught that breath is not a biological function, but a sacred alignment mechanism. When you breathe unconsciously, you're trapped in the lower chambers of the temple, reactive, fragmented, shadowed. But when you breathe with awareness, you ascend the inner staircase. Every inhale is a step upward. Every exhale releases what cannot ascend with you. Imagine your own breath as a bridge carved from light. Beneath it flows the river of thought, endless, restless, reflecting memories and fears. Most people live in that river, tossed by its currents. But when you become the one who stands upon the bridge, you no longer drown in experience. You observe it, you guide it. The river still flows, but you are no longer its captive. You are the consciousness crossing from form to formlessness, from noise to stillness, from reaction to creation. The ancients depicted this journey through myth. In Egypt, Osiris died and was resurrected not through battle, but through alignment with Ma'at, the truth of universal order. In Kabbalah, the Tree of Life shows 10 spheres, 10 modes of consciousness, each connected by breath-like pathways. The mystic's work was to breathe light upward through those paths, uniting matter and divinity. In Buddhism, the monk sits beneath the Bodhi tree and watches his breath until the observer and the observed dissolve into one. Every tradition describes the same moment, the collapse of duality through awareness stabilized by breath. The metaphors are not history lessons, they're mirrors. When you hold one conscious breath, you're performing the same act the ancients did in their temples and caves. You're standing at the threshold of creation. You're saying to the field, I remember. The air that enters your lungs is the same air the pharaohs breathed, the same air that moved across the Himalayan monasteries, the same air that filled the desert prophets' lungs as they listened for God. Breath is the continuity of awareness through time. It is how consciousness keeps discovering itself in new forms. So when we speak of the Quantum Zeno effect, of observation freezing or transforming reality, we're using modern language for an ancient prayer. The true experiment has always been within. When you pause between breaths and enter the stillness of Ra, when you observe the inhalation with the same reverence the Buddha taught, when you feel the Ruach moving through you, like the Kabbalist, you are aligning with the same field. You become both participant and witness in the act of creation. This is what the ancients meant by the phrase, as above, so below. The breath above the cosmic inhalation of stars and galaxies is mirrored by the breath below, the one moving through your chest now. In that mirroring lies your power. You are not separate from the field. You are its localized expression. Every breath is the universe remembering itself through you. Next, we'll step out of metaphor and into embodiment. You'll learn a simple, precise practice that brings this ancient knowledge into daily life. No doctrine, no dogma, just the living experiment of awareness meeting breath. You'll discover how a few seconds of still observation can shift your nervous system, your perception, and the frequency you broadcast to the field. This isn't magic, it's alignment. The ancients called it devotion. Science calls it coherence. You'll call it remembering who you are. Before we go further, a gentle reminder: what follows is not medical advice or a substitute for care. It's an invitation to experience the relationship between awareness and breath safely, softly, as an inner experiment. You're not trying to change your physiology, you're learning to listen to it. The point isn't control, it's communion. Approach this as the ancients did, with reverence. Begin by sitting or standing where you are. You don't need incense candles or ceremony. Your body itself is the temple. Feel your feet against the ground or your seat beneath you, points of contact anchoring you to the physical world. Let your spine lengthen as though drawn upward by an invisible thread. You're aligning the inner pillar of your temple, the same column the Egyptians carved through their sanctuaries. Close your eyes if you wish, but keep your attention soft, receptive. Now notice your natural breath. Don't adjust it yet, just observe it as if meeting an old friend you haven't truly seen in years. Feel the air moving in through your nostrils, cool and quiet. Notice where it flows. Does it reach your chest, your belly, or stop halfway? Every pattern tells a story. Shallow breathing often means protection. Deep breathing usually means safety. There's no right or wrong, only data. Observe it with curiosity, not correction. Then gently invite your breath to lengthen, counting maybe to 4 as you inhale, to 6 as you exhale. The numbers are irrelevant. The awareness is everything. Feel your ribcage expand outward like ancient temple doors slowly opening. With each exhale, let the shoulders soften, the jaw unclench, the muscles release. Imagine exhaling centuries of inherited tension. You don't force the air out, you allow it to leave, carrying what no longer serves. After a few cycles, begin noticing the space between breaths, the pause at the top of the inhale, the rest at the bottom of the exhale. Don't manipulate it, simply recognize it. That's your personal quantum gap, the stillness of Ra, the doorway of Ruach. In that pause, nothing is happening outwardly, yet everything is reorganizing inwardly. Thoughts may rise, sensations may surface. Observe them like clouds drifting across the sky of awareness. You don't chase them, you don't fight them, you breathe. You notice, you return. If emotion surfaces, sadness, restlessness, even joy, acknowledge it gently. You're not trying to feel calm, you're learning to be present. Let the breath move through the feeling as wind moves through leaves. The energy will transform on its own. This is coherence in action, awareness, allowing life to flow without interruption. Now imagine each breath as light entering through the crown of your head, traveling down your spine and settling in your belly. On the exhale, let that light expand outward, forming a sphere around you about 8 feet in all directions. This is your breath field, the electromagnetic aura measurable around every human heart. Visualize it not as fantasy, but as luminous space shimmering softly. With each inhale, the sphere brightens. With each exhale, it stabilizes. You are literally breathing coherence into form. For a moment, hold the breath at the top, just a heartbeat, and feel the stillness spread. The mind may whisper, "Am I doing it right?" Smile at it. That voice is part of the experiment too. You're observing even that. Remember, the observer's calm gaze alters the pattern. You're already shifting frequencies by noticing. If you practice this daily, even for 2 minutes, you'll begin sensing subtle changes. Reactions slow. Noise quiets faster. Decisions arise from clarity rather than compulsion. It's not that life becomes easier, it becomes intelligible. You'll start recognizing how breath leads behavior. Before a difficult conversation, you'll sense the tension rising and choose coherence instead of contraction. Before sleep, you'll rest your attention on the space between breaths and feel the field cradle you. During chaos, you'll anchor in stillness, becoming the eye of your own storm. There's a micro-protocol for this. Notice, name, neutralize, and nourish. Notice the breath where it is what it's saying. Name the state: tight, shallow, deep, spacious, without judgment. Neutralize by observing the pause, the quantum gap. Nourish by breathing into coherence, a slow inhale, slower exhale. This simple sequence turns unconscious reactivity into conscious creation. The nervous system reads your breath as truth. When you breathe peacefully, it believes you're safe. When it feels safe, the field mirrors safety. Events begin, aligning differently. Conversations soften, synchronicities appear. None of this requires belief. The feedback will prove itself. Over time, this practice becomes portable. You'll do it while waiting in line, answering emails, walking under streetlights. No one will notice. Yet the field will. Because in those moments you stop broadcasting chaos and start radiating order. You become a coherence anchor in the collective matrix. Every conscious breath adds stability to the global field, one person at a time. Remember, you're not fixing anything. You're remembering rhythm. Breath in, awareness expands. Breath out, awareness returns. Between them lies the quantum doorway through which transformation enters quietly, naturally, without strain. That's the still point where effort dissolves and creation begins. In the next section, we'll cross that threshold. You'll see how this observer state, once stabilized, changes the storyline of your life itself. We'll explore what happens when you stop being the character, reacting to the plot, and start becoming the author of the script, how this shift rewrites your relationships, your work, and even the way reality responds to your presence. Something profound happens the moment you move from witnessing your breath to witnessing your life. You realize that every situation, every relationship, every challenge is breathing to through you, with you. Reality inhales your attention and exhales your experiences. The shift from victim to creator isn't philosophical, it's biological. Your nervous system stops echoing the past and begins encoding new frequencies into the field. It's subtle yet unmistakable. The body relaxes, the mind quiets, and suddenly events that once triggered you now feel like conversations rather than confrontations. This is the turning point, the moment observation matures into authorship. The Quantum Zeno effect no longer freezes you in an old pattern. It stabilizes the new. Each time you observe from coherence instead of fear, the universe rewrites the code of probability. You stop being someone to whom life happens and become the consciousness through which life organizes itself. Let's explore what this looks like in practice. Imagine the first scene. Money. You open your banking app and feel that familiar tightening in your stomach. Numbers become verdicts, proof of safety or lack thereof. Normally, this triggers contraction, shallow breath, fast thoughts, self-judgment. But now you pause. You breathe as the observer. You let the inhale expand your chest. You let the exhale ground your awareness into the floor. The field sensing coherence begins recalibrating. You realize the numbers aren't your worth, they're reflections of your state. You feel the emotional contraction loosen. From that stillness, creative thought flows, a new idea, an inspired action, a forgotten opportunity resurfaces. The financial pattern shifts not because you forced it, but because you stopped freezing fear into it. Money is energy. Energy obeys coherence. Second scene, relationship. An argument begins, same words, same tension, same cycle. The old you would defend, explain, or retreat. But this time you catch the breath before the reaction. You feel the energy rising, the throat tightening. You inhale slowly, hold the pause, exhale without rush. The silence between words becomes your ally. In that pause, empathy reappears. You notice not just your partner's anger, but their pain beneath it. You respond not to the words, but to the humanity. The fight dissolves into understanding. This is the alchemy of observation, the field rearranging through coherence. Third scene, leadership. You're at work facing uncertainty. People look to you for decisions. The atmosphere feels heavy, full of anxiety. Instead of amplifying the noise, you step into the observer state. You breathe deliberately before speaking. Your voice slows, your presence steadies. Without announcing it, you create coherence in the room. Others start sinking subconsciously to your rhythm. Ideas flow, tension eases. Leadership at its core isn't command, it's coherence transmission. The greatest leaders throughout history understood this instinctively. They mastered their internal field first, knowing the external would follow. These scenes are not imagination. They're micro-demonstrations of how reality shifts around an aligned observer. The field doesn't need dramatic gestures. It listens to frequency. The moment you choose stillness over story, the old narrative loses power. You begin noticing how the same event that once felt threatening now feels neutral. That neutrality is not apathy, it's mastery. You're not detached. You're centered. The creator doesn't escape experience. They shape it from within. The psychological mechanism is simple yet profound. Each time you anchor in breath instead of reaction, you rewire the neural loop connecting emotion and behavior. Each conscious breath forms a new synaptic pathway, proving to your nervous system that safety can exist inside uncertainty. Over time, this pattern becomes default. Calm becomes your baseline. The external world, once chaotic, starts echoing your inner order. Opportunities arrive in coherence's timing, not late, not early, but precisely aligned. This is what ancient initiates meant when they spoke of dominion, not dominance over others, but mastery over vibration. Dominion is the capacity to hold your frequency steady while the world oscillates around you. You no longer collapse into the collective storm. You become its eye. And from that center, creation begins to spiral outward. The paradox is that nothing outside changes first. The numbers, the faces, the weather remain the same. But the meaning you assign dissolves. Without meaning as glue, the old pattern falls apart. The field responds instantly to this release, reassembling circumstances to match your new coherence. A problem vanishes. A solution appears. A person calls out of nowhere. We label these synchronicities, but they are simply reality catching up to your new observation point. To sustain this shift, practice microalignment. Before speaking, breathe once. Before reacting, notice the gap. Before judging, observe. These small acts accumulate faster than effort. The universe measures frequency, not intensity. 5 seconds of pure coherence can outweigh hours of struggle. Understand this deeply. Creation doesn't require constant focus. It requires stable presence. When you are coherent, your very existence instructs the field. You don't need to chant, visualize, or affirm endlessly. The universe reads your state faster than your words. That's why transformation accelerates when you stop trying so hard. Effort belongs to the victim. Awareness belongs to the creator. This doesn't mean you never feel fear again. It means you know what to do when it arises. You observe, breathe, pause. You become the scientist of your own consciousness. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking what pattern is being revealed for observation. Every difficulty becomes data, every trigger, a teacher, every breath, a new experiment in creation. Over time, others will sense something different in you. They may call it calm wisdom or presence. What they're really perceiving is coherence, the silent language of alignment. Without effort, you'll begin influencing environments, harmonizing discord, anchoring stability where it's lacking. This is service without sacrifice. You don't heal others. You remind them of their natural rhythm simply by embodying yours. You've crossed the threshold now. The breath that once sustained your biology is now sustaining your evolution. You've turned from participant to observer to architect. The same field that mirrored your unconscious loops now responds to your conscious alignment. This is the pivot point of power, the moment you realize reality doesn't need to be controlled. It only needs to be cohered. In the next part, we'll bring this realization into philosophy and human truth, how dignity, belonging, and meaning arise when you live as the still observer in motion. You'll see that stillness isn't isolation, it's public art, and that your coherence, quietly expressed, is the most radical form of leadership this world has ever known. There comes a moment in every awakening when you realize that coherence isn't something you do, it's something you allow. The breath you once managed now moves you. The awareness you once sought now rests in you like a calm tide. In this state, life ceases to feel like a problem to be solved and becomes an artwork continuously unfolding. Each encounter, each challenge, each silence is part of the same masterpiece consciousness meeting itself in infinite form. The ancients built monuments for this realization. The Greeks called it psyche, harmonia, the harmony of soul. The Chinese wu wei, effortless action. The Egyptians ma'at, in human form. They all pointed to the same principle that human dignity arises when action flows from stillness, when movement originates in awareness rather than reaction. This stillness isn't withdrawal. It's presence fully inhabited. It's the mountain that holds its place while the sky changes color. It's the river that continues flowing even as stones redirect its course. When you live as the observer, life no longer feels like an endless chase. You begin to sense a quiet rhythm beneath events, the pulse of the quantum field expressing through daily existence. You realize that meaning isn't something to search for, it's something you create through attention. Even mundane acts, drinking water, walking, listening, become sacred gestures when infused with awareness. Stillness in this sense becomes a kind of public art. You're sculpting coherence in real time and others feel it without words. Imagine walking through a crowded city. Noise, movement, urgency everywhere. Yet your breath remains steady. You stand at a crosswalk not as a bystander lost in motion, but as the calm center through which all motion passes. People around you may never know why they feel lighter near you. They may not even look up. But their bodies register your coherence, their hearts entrain subtly to your rhythm. This is how consciousness spreads quietly through resonance. Stillness travels faster than sound. This is the dignity of being human, to know you are both particle and wave, both the observer and the observed. To act but without losing presence. To care deeply but without collapsing into chaos. To participate in creation while remembering you are creation itself. When you embody this, belonging ceases to depend on approval. You belong by virtue of existence. Every breath you take is the universe affirming your place within it. Agency too changes meaning. It no longer comes from willpower or ambition, but from coherence. You find yourself making decisions that feel effortless yet precise, as if guided by an intelligence beyond logic. This is not fatalism, it's participation. You are co-authoring reality with the field. The difference is that now your pen moves in rhythm with the universal hand. You become, as the mystic said, a clear instrument through which the divine composes itself. Notice how this dissolves grandiosity. There's no need to prove enlightenment or declare mastery. The more deeply you rest in awareness, the less you need to announce it. The power of coherence doesn't shout, it radiates. It doesn't demand recognition, it invites remembering. Real wisdom feels ordinary because it integrates seamlessly with life. Washing dishes becomes meditation. Listening becomes prayer. Speaking becomes vibration aligned with truth. Stillness doesn't isolate you from the world's noise. It harmonizes you with it. The traffic, the laughter, the grief, they all become notes in the same cosmic composition. When you live from this awareness, judgment softens. You stop dividing reality into good and bad, success, and failure, spiritual and mundane. You see it all as the field in conversation with itself. You understand that even chaos has choreography, even pain has intelligence. What once felt like opposition now feels like contrast, a necessary texture in the music of becoming. Perhaps the most compassionate realization is that everyone is doing their best, with the level of coherence they can sustain. The angry, the fearful, the impatient, they're simply caught in loops that haven't yet been observed. When you encounter them, you no longer mirror their turbulence. You breathe. You hold space. You remember that once you too were lost in unconscious breath. Your stillness becomes the invitation for their awakening. You serve without agenda. This is what agency without grandiosity looks like. You don't try to save the world. You stabilize it. You don't impose truth. You embody it. You don't fight darkness. You illuminate it simply by being light. Humanity's evolution depends less on new systems and more on new states. When enough people live from coherence, institutions will reorganize naturally. The outer follows the inner always. The philosopher Martin Buber once wrote, "In each thou we address the eternal thou." When you look at another human being from observer awareness, you're seeing the divine observing itself. That gaze carries immeasurable healing power. It says, "I see you, not your story, not your fear, but your essence." That simple recognition restores dignity more effectively than any doctrine. And when you extend that gaze to yourself, everything softens. You forgive not as a moral act, but as a natural outcome of seeing clearly. You understand that even your mistakes were experiments in consciousness. Every moment of confusion brought you closer to the still point you inhabit now. From this view, nothing was wasted. Every breath was part of the training. As you move through the world with this understanding, reality feels lighter. Not because it's perfect, but because it's alive. The field dances with you, responding to each coherent step. You begin to trust timing. You stop fearing change. You recognize that stillness and motion are not opposites. They are phases of the same eternal breath. In this realization lies profound peace. You were never lost, only unobserved. The field was never silent, only waiting for your awareness to listen. Now you hear it. Now you are it. In the final part, we'll complete the circle with a simple ritual, a 3-breath coherence practice that seals this awareness into embodiment. You'll choose a single word, a frequency, a vow to carry forward. With those breaths, you'll declare yourself not as a seeker of the field, but as its living expression. And as you do, you'll subscribe not just to this channel, but to the frequency of remembrance itself. Before you leave this space, I want you to come fully into your body right here, right now. Feel the quiet hum beneath your skin, the pulse in your wrists, the subtle motion of breath rising and falling like a tide that's been moving since the first moment you arrived on Earth. Everything we've explored, quantum observation, coherence, stillness, converges in this simplicity. This is where knowledge becomes embodiment. Now take a gentle inhale through your nose. Slow, deliberate. Feel the air glide in as if the universe itself were breathing you. Hold it lightly at the top, not with strain, but with reverence. In this pause, realize that you are the observer holding existence still. This is the breath that bridges worlds. And now exhale through your mouth, unforced, releasing the day, the loops, the noise. Let the field recalibrate around your stillness. That's one coherent breath. Again, inhale deeper, this time into the center of your chest. Feel it expand like a sun rising inside you. Hold. Notice the quiet between heartbeats. In that quiet, there is no past or future, only the eternal, now the single note of awareness that sings creation into being. Exhale slowly, softly. Let it flow down your spine into the ground, as though you're sending harmony into the earth itself. That's 2. One final breath. Inhale with intention. Gather everything you've learned, every insight, every still moment you've experienced while listening. Let the air collect like light inside you. Hold it and choose a word, a frequency, a state of being that you will carry forward from this moment. Maybe your word is peace, maybe freedom, maybe trust, love, or remember. Whatever arises, let it appear naturally. Now exhale gently and speak quietly aloud or within yourself. I choose to your word as the observer. Let that declaration resonate. It's not an affirmation. It's a command to the field encoded through breath and intention. You've just collapsed a new probability, one where awareness leads and reaction follows. This is the sacred mechanism hidden in plain sight consciousness expressing itself through the rhythm of breathing. Every inhale draws spirit into matter. Every exhale returns matter to spirit. When you make this exchange conscious, you become the meeting point of heaven and earth. Sit for a moment in the afterglow of that realization. Notice the stillness that follows, not empty but full, alive, luminous. That stillness is your true nature. It's the same awareness that watched your first breath, and it will be there to watch your last. You've remembered something timeless. Stillness is not the absence of motion. It is the presence of meaning. The field listens to you now, not your words, but your coherence. If these words have met you at the right time, it's because the field arranged it. You weren't scrolling randomly. You were guided by resonance. You were meant to pause here, to hold one breath differently, to glimpse what life feels like beyond the loop. So before you go, anchor this frequency, not through thought, but through rhythm. 3 breaths, 1 word, 1 intention. That's your ritual. And if you feel called to deepen this practice, to continue exploring the edges where consciousness meets creation, then subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency. Every video here is an experiment in coherence, an ongoing dialogue between you and the quantum field. When you subscribe, you're not joining an audience. You're joining a collective calibration. Human beings remembering together that the observer changes what is observed. Let this be your closing act today. Stand or sit quietly after the video ends. No rush. Let one more breath find you. Inhale. Feel the universe draw near. Exhale. Let it move through you as you. The moment your awareness meets the breath, you've already aligned. There's nothing else to fix, no doctrine to believe. You are home in the stillness that creates worlds. And as you move back into your day through noise, through conversation, through light and shadow, remember this rhythm. Every breath is another chance to return. Every pause is another doorway. Every moment of awareness is another miracle. So breathe not to survive, but to remember. Not to control, but to create. The breath is the key. You are the door. Step through. And subscribe to this frequency.